The dojo is empty at this hour. Every other student has gone home. He is still here. Not because someone is watching. Not because a master commanded it. Not because discipline is forcing his body to stay when every reasonable argument says the day is finished. He is still here because leaving, the option of leaving, the door 10 steps behind him, the cool night air waiting on the other side of it, does not occur to him. This is not what discipline looks like from the outside. From the outside, it looks like obsession, like the particular madness of a man who has lost perspective on what a normal amount of effort is. But from the inside, from the only place it can be understood, it feels like nothing at all. Not struggle, not sacrifice, not the white-knuckled, jaw-clenched endurance of a man forcing himself through something that resists him. Just the next repetition. Just here, just this. Here is what no one tells you about hard work. The men who do the most of it are not the ones who suffer through it most heroically. They are the ones who stopped experiencing it as hard. Not because it became easy. The weight is still heavy. The hours are still long. The difficulty is real and present and unchanged. But their relationship to the difficulty, the interior experience of meeting it every day, changed completely. And when that change happens, the brain does not resist the work. It reaches for it. The Japanese understand this through a concept older than any productivity system alive today. Mushin, empty mind. Not the emptiness of absence, not the blank, passive state of a mind with nothing in it. The emptiness of a vessel that has been cleared of everything that interferes with the doing. No resistance, no negotiation, no internal argument between the part that wants to work and the part that wants to stop. Just action, clean, direct, without the friction of a self that must be persuaded. Mushin is not a technique. It is what happens to a man when he is trained so deeply and so consistently that the training has become his nature. And the resistance that once stood between him and the work has simply, quietly, without drama, dissolved. The brain that once had to be forced into hard work now craves it, not as a reward, not because of what the work produces, because the work itself has become the most natural expression of what the man is. And that the complete reversal of the brain's relationship to difficulty is what this story is about. The boy who trained for the wrong reason. His name was Haruki. He was 16 years old and he trained harder than anyone his master had seen in 20 years of teaching. That was the problem, not the training. The reason for it. He had arrived at the dojo 3 years before, small for his age, quieter than the other boys, carrying the specific quality of determination that belongs to someone who has decided to use discipline as an answer to something that discipline cannot actually answer. He was running from something. His master knew it on the first day. He said nothing. He watched. Haruki trained with the ferocity of a man who believes that if he works hard enough, long enough, and with enough visible intensity, something inside him will finally go quiet. He was the first to arrive, the last to leave. He practiced forms in the dark of his sleeping mat when the dormitory was still. He woke before the birds and was at the post. The practice post, the wooden striking post worn smooth by 10,000 impacts before any other student had opened their eyes. He was, by every external measure, the most disciplined student in the dojo. He was also the most exhausted, not physically, in the deeper way. The way a man is exhausted when his effort and his peace are pointed in opposite directions, when the work is enormous and genuine and real. But the reason beneath it is using the work as fuel for something that cannot be resolved by any amount of output. His master's name was Kenji, 50 years old. A man whose stillness was not the stillness of passivity, but of something that has been in motion for so long it has found its natural speed, which happens to look, from the outside, like rest. He watched Haruki for 6 months before saying anything. Then one evening, the dojo empty, the light going amber, Haruki still at the post long past when the session had ended. Kenji spoke, not to correct, not to instruct. Just, "What are you trying to outrun?" Haruki stopped. The impact of the question landed differently than questions usually landed, because it arrived at the exact location of the thing he had not said to anyone, not to the other students, not to himself in the privacy of honest thought. He turned. "I don't know what you mean," he said. Kenji looked at him with the expression of a man who has no investment in being believed. "Your body is here every morning," he said. "Your training is real. Your effort is genuine." He paused. "But you are not training to become something. You are training to escape something, and those two things look identical from the outside." He walked toward the door. "They are completely different from the inside." He was right. Haruki knew it the moment the words landed. He had not come to the dojo out of love for the sword, not out of genuine calling or the specific pull of a craft that had recognized him and asked him to come closer. He had come because the structure, the absolute, total, consuming structure of a life organized around daily hard work, was the only thing that quieted the noise of a family that had come apart in his 12th year, the noise of a version of himself he had formed in the years before the dojo that he found, looking back, deeply uncomfortable to recognize. The sword was not the point. The exhaustion was the point. If he was exhausted enough at the end of each day, there was no room left for anything else. This worked. For a while. Until the evening he realized that the exhaustion itself had become the thing he was running from, that he had built a structure so total, so consuming, that there was no longer any space inside it for the question of why he was inside it. He had replaced one noise with another, louder, more respectable, externally indistinguishable from genuine discipline, but noise nonetheless. He told Kenji the next morning, "Not all of it, enough." His master listened without interruption. When Haruki finished, and the silence lasted long enough to have texture, then Kenji said, "Do you know what hard work actually is?" Haruki waited. Not the effort, not the hours, not the willingness to endure discomfort. He looked at the post. Hard work, real hard work, the kind that builds something permanent, is effort in the presence of presence. He turned to Haruki. "What you have been doing is effort in the presence of escape. It looks the same. It produces very different things." "What does it produce?" said Haruki. "Fatigue," said Kenji, "and a very impressive performance of someone who loves the work." The humiliation of it was quiet. No audience, no public moment, no dramatic collapse. Just a boy standing in an empty dojo on an ordinary morning, holding a sword he had been gripping for 3 years, and realizing that he did not know, had never allowed himself to know, whether he actually wanted to be here. He almost left. He sat with that possibility for 3 full days, continuing the training mechanically, his body going through the forms while his mind stood at the edge of a decision that felt enormous and was, at its core, very simple. Stay because you have chosen it, or go. But stop staying because staying keeps you from having to choose. On the 4th morning, he walked into the dojo before dawn. Kenji was already there. He was doing nothing, sitting in the center of the room in the particular stillness of a man who has made the interior quiet enough that doing nothing is not the same as wasting time. Haruki sat across from him. "I want to stay," he said. "Why?" The question was direct. No softening. Haruki took a breath. And for the first time, the first real time, past the rehearsed answers, past the noise of the escape and the performance and the years of effort pointed in the wrong direction, he looked for the honest answer. It was there, beneath everything else, smaller than he expected, quieter, without the dramatic urgency of the thing that had been driving him, but real, undeniably, completely, stubbornly real. "Because when the form is right," he said slowly, "there are moments when I am not thinking about anything. Not the past, not what I'm running from, not anything outside the next movement." He paused. "Those moments are the only time I feel finished, complete, like nothing is missing." Kenji looked at him for a long moment. "That feeling," he said, "is what we have actually been training toward." He stood. "Mike, now we can begin." What beginning actually meant. What Kenji showed him next that dismantled everything Haruki thought he understood about how the brain learns to crave the work. That is where this story turns. Because the method Kenji used was not what Haruki expected. It was not harder. It was stranger. And for the first 3 days of it, Haruki was certain it wasn't working. He was wrong. But the reason he was wrong, that takes a moment to understand. and understanding it changes everything about how effort works. The method that looks like nothing. Kenji gave Haruki one instruction on the first morning of the new beginning. 1. Today, do less than you can. Haruki waited for the rest. There was no rest. How much less? Enough that you finish wanting more. He walked away. Haruki did perhaps a third of his normal session. I'm stopped, stood there, wanting more. The wanting felt wrong, uncomfortable, like leaving a meal before fullness. He went to Kenji. I stopped, he said. I feel like I wasted the morning. You feel like you want tomorrow to arrive, said Kenji. That is not the same thing. That evening, where exhaustion would normally have flattened him, there was something else, a low hum, an anticipation, his mind returning without instruction to the post, to the unfinished work, to the thing left open in the specific way that makes the unfinished more present than anything completed. He woke the next morning before the hour, not from discipline, from wanting. This is the first mechanism Kenji was teaching. Not through explanation, through experience. The brain does not crave what exhausts it. It craves what it has been given just enough of to want more. The man who trains to his absolute limit every day is not building desire for the work. He is building the brain's association between work and depletion. And a brain that associates work with depletion will, given any choice, choose not to work, not from laziness, from self-preservation. This is the first myth that must break. The myth that more is always more disciplined. The man who trains until he cannot stand is not more disciplined than the man who stops while he still wants to continue. He is less intelligent about how desire is built, because desire for the work, genuine, organic, self-generated wanting, is not produced by maximum effort. It is produced by the deliberate, slightly maddening practice of stopping before the wanting stops. Leave room, leave wanting. The return becomes inevitable. The second instruction came 3 days later. Today, do only one thing, the same thing, for the entire session. One movement within one form, said Kenji, for 2 hours. The movement was the most basic raising of the sword to the start of the overhead strike. Haruki had done this 10,000 times. I already know this, he said. Show me, said Kenji. Haruki did it. Your left shoulder rises before the right hand initiates. Has done for 3 years. You have never noticed because you always moved past it before the noticing could arrive. He sat. Do it again. Nothing past this, until you feel the shoulder. For the first 40 minutes, nothing. Around the 50th repetition, he felt it, not identified it, not located it intellectually, felt it, the microscopic premature lift. The quarter second of wrongness in the sequence, he stopped. Did it again, this time reaching for the correct order. Hand first, shoulder following. It felt strange. He did it again. Less strange. By the end of 2 hours, something had shifted that 3 years of full-form practice had never produced. Kenji looked at it. 3 years of maximum effort. You never found it. No. 2 hours of one thing. You found it. He stood. That is the difference between effort and attention. Most men spend their training lives substituting one for the other, working harder when what is needed is working closer. The brain does not deepen its relationship with work through accumulated hours. It deepens through the quality of attention brought to each specific moment. A man who does one thing with full attention has done more real work than a man who does 10 things with divided attention for the same duration. The first man's brain has been given something to hold. The second man's brain has been given 10 things to skim, and a brain that skims does not develop craving. It develops the habit of skimming. If your relationship with hard work has always been one of volume, filling hours completely, measuring the session by how destroyed you feel at the end, this is not a criticism. This is the most common form the wrong relationship with effort takes in men who genuinely want to build something. The direction is right. The mechanism is pointed backward. 6 weeks in, Haruki noticed something at the evening meal. His hands were restless, not anxious, not excess energy. The restlessness of hands that had developed through 6 weeks of deliberate, narrow, quality-first practice. An appetite for the work, not for the exhaustion, not for the identity of someone seen to be disciplined, for the specific physical sensation of the form closing around him correctly. His hands wanted the post, not tomorrow. Now, he let the wanting sit, unfed, present, alive through the evening and into sleep, waiting on the other side of the night. He woke before the hour, not from discipline, from craving. He told Kenji, "Before," the master said, "the work was medicine, taken because the alternative was worse." He looked at Haruki's hands. "Now it is appetite. You are not taking medicine. You are hungry." "How did it change?" "You stopped exhausting the wanting before it became wanting. You gave the brain just enough and let it ask for more, until asking became its habit." He paused. "And then you gave it something specific enough to actually taste. And the brain remembers what it tasted," said Haruki. "And returns," said Kenji, "to what it remembers." But the full mechanism, the one that takes a brain from craving the work to being unable to imagine the day without it, had one more stage. One Kenji had not yet introduced. Not because Haruki wasn't ready, because it could not be introduced. It had to be arrived at, through a specific failure that the new method made possible, and the old one never could. The failure that builds the craving. The failure arrived on an ordinary morning. No warning, no particular quality of the day that suggested it was coming. Haruki was at the post, 6 weeks into the new method. The appetite established. The hands knowing what they wanted before the mind caught up. And nothing worked. Not slightly off. Not the minor imprecision that daily practice produces and corrects. Nothing. The shoulder compensation was back. The form that had been correcting itself across weeks of narrow, focused work had, overnight, without explanation, reverted. Completely. As though the 6 weeks had not happened. He stopped, stood at the post with the sword at his side, and felt something he had not expected to feel again. The old noise. Not as loud as before, not carrying the same weight of escape and avoidance, but present. The familiar voice of a man whose effort has produced nothing visible and who is now calculating whether the effort was ever going to produce anything at all. He went to Kenji. He described it without softening. Kenji listened, said nothing for a moment. Then, "How did it feel when the form reverted?" "Like losing ground," said Haruki. "Like the work wasn't holding." "Yes," said Kenji. "And what did you want to do?" Haruki was honest. "Train harder, stay longer, force the correction back." Kenji nodded slowly. "That," he said, "is the old pattern asking to come back." He stood, walked to the window. "What you experienced this morning is not failure. It is consolidation." It felt like failure. "All consolidation does," said Kenji, "because consolidation requires the skill to temporarily become less visible, while the brain reorganizes what it has learned into something permanent." He turned. The man who panics at consolidation and trains harder, he interrupts the reorganization. He breaks the process at the moment it is doing its most important work. And the man who doesn't panic, does less, trusts the work already done, returns tomorrow. This is the piece of Mushin that cannot be taught through instruction. It can only be understood through the experience of living it. Because the consolidation point, the moment when progress appears to reverse, when weeks of genuine work seem to vanish overnight, is precisely the point where the wrong relationship with effort causes the most damage. The man who is training to feel productive, to confirm his identity as someone who works hard, to use the effort as medicine or escape or performance, that man cannot survive consolidation. Because consolidation produces nothing he can point to, and so he overrides it, trains through it. Forces the work past the point where forcing helps and into the territory where it actively prevents the thing it is trying to produce. But the man who has built a genuine appetite for the work, who is training not to produce visible output, but because the training itself is what he wants, that man can do the hardest thing in any practice. Stop, trust, return. If you feel this, if you have abandoned practices at precisely the point they were about to become permanent, mistaking consolidation for failure and failure for evidence that the approach was wrong, this is not a pattern unique to you. This is the most common place that genuine progress is abandoned. Not at the beginning, when the difficulty is expected. At the consolidation point, weeks or months in. when the visible gains have temporarily plateaued and the brain is doing its invisible work, and the man watching from the outside cannot see the work happening and concludes it has stopped. It has not stopped. He has. Haruki did what Kenji said. He did less that morning. Returned to the narrow, slow, single-movement work without forcing the correction. He returned the next day, and the day after. On the fourth morning, the shoulder stayed. Not tentatively, not with the fragility of something recently recovered. With the solidity of something that had been reorganized at a deeper level than the original learning had reached. The correction was not back where it had been. It was further in, more permanent, more truly his. He told Kenji. The master looked at the form for a long time. "There," he said. "That is the difference between a skill learned and a skill owned." What is the difference? A skill learned can be lost under pressure. A skill owned cannot be taken by anything. Not exhaustion, not disruption, not the passing of years. He looked at Haruki. Owned skills live below the level where effort reaches. They live in the place that is built not by training harder, but by trusting the training enough to let it settle. "Mushin," said Haruki. It was the first time he had used the word. Kenji looked at him. "Say more." "The empty mind," said Haruki slowly. "It's not something you build by filling it with more training. It's what's left when you stop filling it with resistance." Kenji was quiet for a moment. Then, simply, "Yes, this is the third mechanism, and it is the one that completes the others." So the first mechanism built the appetite. Stop before the wanting stops. Let the brain ask for more until asking is its habit. The second mechanism built the attention. Narrow the work until it is specific enough to actually taste. Let the brain hold one thing long enough to know it. The third mechanism builds the ownership. Trust the consolidation. Do less at the moment the instinct says do more. Let the learning settle past the level where effort reaches. These three together, not as a system, not as a schedule, but as a lived orientation toward the work, produce the state that Mushin describes. Not immediately, not on a timeline, but reliably, inevitably. The way the blade becomes inevitable, given enough time and the right kind of heat. 3 months after the consolidation morning, something happened that Haruki had not been told to expect. He arrived at the post before dawn. He began, and somewhere in the first 10 minutes, without a decision, without a moment he could point to afterward, he stopped thinking about the form. Not because his mind had gone elsewhere, because the form and the mind had become, briefly, completely, without gap, the same thing. He was not doing the practice. He was the practice. The shoulder was correct. The hand initiated first. The sequence arrived in the order it was supposed to arrive in, not because he was monitoring it, not because any part of him was watching and correcting, because this was simply what his body did now. Mushin, not constructed, not performed, not arrived at through gritted teeth and maximum effort and the white-knuckled insistence on outcomes. They'd arrived at the way all real things arrive. Through the patient, trusting, appetite-fed practice of a man who stopped fighting his own brain and taught it, gently, what to want. He stood at the post when it was finished. The light was coming up. The dojo still empty around him. He felt nothing spectacular, no thunder, no revelation, no dramatic announcement of transformation. Just right. The specific quiet rightness of a man in the exact place, doing the exact thing, in the exact way, that his nature had been pointing toward all along. He had not forced his brain to crave the work. He had simply removed everything that was preventing the craving from arriving on its own. But Mushin, the state, the real state, not the brief visitation of it, but the settled, daily, reliable presence of it. That was not yet what Haruki had. What he had was the first genuine taste. And Kenji, who had been watching from the doorway for the last 10 minutes without Haruki knowing, had one more thing to show him. Not a technique, not an instruction. Something that could not be given, only recognized. And Haruki, standing in the early light with the sword at his side and the form finally, completely, permanently his, was almost ready to see it. The craving that becomes the man. Kenji stepped into the dojo without announcing himself. Haruki turned. The master looked at him for a long moment, with the specific quality of attention that a man brings to something he has been watching develop across many months and is now seeing complete for the first time. He said nothing immediately. He walked to the center of the room, sat down. "Show me," he said. When Haruki moved through the full form, not the single movement, not the narrow, focused, deliberate work of the method's early stages, the complete form, beginning to end. And something was different in the watching of it, visible to Kenji in the way that certain things are only visible to a man who has spent decades learning to look past the surface of movement into the quality beneath it. The form was correct, not impressive, not spectacular. Correct, in the specific, deep, permanent way that only arrives when the learning has traveled below the level where effort lives, below the conscious, monitoring, self-assessing mind, into the body, into the place where things are kept that cannot be taken. When it was finished, Kenji said, "What were you thinking about?" Haruki considered it honestly. "Nothing," he said. Nothing like absence. Nothing like there was no gap between what I intended and what happened. No space for thought to enter. "Yes," said Kenji. He was quiet for a moment. "That is not a technique you achieved," he said. "That is what was always underneath. You simply, finally, stopped covering it. This is what Mushin actually is. Not a state produced by training, a state revealed by training. The empty mind was always there, beneath the noise, beneath the resistance, beneath the exhausting negotiation between the part of a man that wants to work and the part that wants to stop. The training did not build it. The training cleared the path to it. This distinction is everything. Because the man who believes Mushin is something he must construct will always be constructing. Always one more session, one more month, one more level of effort away from the state he is trying to produce. And the man who understands it as something to be uncovered stops fighting, stops forcing, and trains instead with the patient confidence of someone removing layers from something that was already there, waiting. Kenji spoke for a long time that morning, not in the clipped, precise language of instruction, in the slower, more personal language of a man passing something from one generation to the next. He told Haruki about his own teacher, about the years it had taken to understand that the craving for work was not something to be manufactured through willpower or constructed through identity, that it arrives, naturally, inevitably, without forcing, when three things are present simultaneously: the appetite built by incompleteness, the attention built by narrowness, the ownership built by trust. These three, he said, together, over time, produce a man whose brain has been reorganized around the work. Not because he forced it to be, because he gave it what it needed to choose it. He looked at Haruki. The brain is not your enemy. It was never your enemy. It simply needed to be shown, through experience, not instruction, that the work is where the good things are. The satisfaction, said Haruki. The satisfaction, the absorption, the specific quality of a life that is pulling you rather than a life you are pushing yourself through. He paused. Once the brain knows those things live inside the work, it stops running from the work. It runs toward it, said Haruki. It runs toward it, Kenji confirmed. Every morning, without requiring permission, without requiring motivation or identity or the performance of discipline for an audience. Just toward it, just toward it. Now, here, your life, not a dojo in the gray hour before dawn, not a practice post worn smooth by 10,000 correct and incorrect impacts. Not a master who has spent 20 years learning to see past the surface of movement into what lives beneath. Your life, which has a practice in it somewhere, or the seed of one, that your brain has been running from with the sophisticated efficiency of something that has been trained by years of the wrong relationship with effort to associate work with depletion. That association is not permanent. It is not your character, not your nature, not the fixed truth of who you are in relation to difficulty. It is a learned pattern, and learned patterns can be unlearned. Not through force, not through the grim, white-knuckled insistence on output that produced the pattern in the first place. Through the three mechanisms. Here is the one thing. Whatever practice you're trying to build, whatever work your life is asking of you, tonight, before tomorrow begins, Decide to do less than you think you should. Not as permanent limitation, as deliberate incompleteness. Stop at the point where the wanting is still alive. Set the work down with something left in it. Let the night pass with the incompleteness present. And notice, tomorrow morning, before the discipline has been consulted, before the identity of someone who works hard has been assembled, whether something in you reaches toward the unfinished thing. That reach, small, quiet, easy to miss if you are not listening for it, is the beginning of the craving. Not manufactured, not performed, real. Arriving not because you forced it, but because you finally gave it the only condition it has ever needed: room. The second myth breaks here. The myth that the men who do the most hard work are the ones with the strongest willpower. They are not. They are the ones whose brains have been reorganized. Through patience, through attention, through the specific intelligence of incompleteness and narrowness and trust. Into men for whom the work is not the opposite of rest. The work is where they rest, where the noise stops, where the gap closes, where the man and the motion and the moment are briefly, completely, without remainder. The same thing. 6 months after the morning in the early light, and a new student arrived at the dojo. Young, quiet, carrying the specific quality of determination that belongs to someone using discipline as an answer to something discipline cannot answer. Kenji watched him for 3 days, then called Haruki. "You see it?" he said. Haruki looked at the new student, at the ferocity, the hours, the exhaustion worn like evidence of seriousness. "Yes," he said. "What do you see?" "A man training to escape something." "What does he need?" Haruki watched the student at the post. "To do less," he said, "until the wanting becomes real." Kenji said nothing. He simply stepped back. And Haruki walked toward the new student the way Kenji had once walked toward him. Without announcement, without preamble, with only a question. The dojo is still empty at this hour. The new student has gone home. Haruki is still here. Not from discipline, not from the performance of dedication, not from the noise of a life being escaped through the exhaustion of effort. He is here because leaving. The door 10 steps behind him, the cool night waiting on the other side, does not occur to him, not because he is forcing himself to stay, because the work is where he is, and a man who has found where he is does not need a reason to remain. He is already home. If this found the craving in you, subscribe. One path, one practice, every week.